These pods can trigger anything from bombs to traps to mutts. We cannot move without this device. There's no guarantee that our database is complete. There could be new pods that we're not aware of, because we don't want the game makers to know we have this intel. It has a self-destruct on it. You flip this switch, say Nightlock 3 times, and it blows itself in anything within a 10-foot radius. Stay within our unit. Even with the hollow, it's likely that new pods have been set. Whatever they contain, they are meant to kill you.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 76th Hunger Games.
We interrupt this program to bring you...
All right, everybody, my name is Kevin.
I'm Adam.
And I'm Julie.
And we are your Real Movie Guys, and welcome back to another episode of The Real Review, the series where we review and discuss all your favorite movies. On today's episode, we're wrapping up the Hunger Games series and talking about The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2. Katniss and a team of rebels from District 13 prepare for the final battle that'll decide the fate of Panem. We did it. We made it to the end of Hunger Games. We made it through the slog that was Mockingjay Part 1. And you know what? Again, it's been a while, so I was like, all right, I made it through Part 1. Part 2 is going to reward me. It's going to be great. It was fine. I really expected more. This again, it just sucks. It really sucks when you talk about this, because there's a lot of things I really wanted out of this movie. And again, this might have to do maybe with the source material more than it has to do with so much the movie. But again, I have to blame the movie at the end of the day, because they make a lot of the decisions here. But kind of some of the problems I had with Part 1 kind of treaded on into Part 2. The pacing's definitely a mess in this movie, unfortunately. Until we get to the end, then I think it actually picks up and it ramps up, and it's actually pretty exciting up until you get to the end. Even then, though, there's some stop-and-go moments. I'm like, did we really need to do that? But a lot of my complaints, I think, have to do with some of the decisions that were made with this movie. But overall, I think it's a fine conclusion to the Hunger Games series, if a little corny, I think, by the time we get to the end and we have the little, after credits and, everyone's, having their side of the story here. But I'm curious to see what you guys think. Adam, were you satisfied with the Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2?
Definitely more satisfied than Part 1.
Right.
But you can still feel all the padding for time.
Right.
And that's where it really hurts this film, too. Because it's definitely a more enjoyable film.
Yes.
But it really sucks that all of a sudden, I'm into it, and then I get taken out.
Then it's like, hey, stop. We need to make the runtime go a little bit longer.
Like,
here.
whoa, relax.
We need
got
to
other things to
loiter.
talk about first.
We need to loiter randomly in a tunnel for a while, just because we can't keep going. The plot has to stop. Too much story. Calm down. Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
It's a better movie.
Right.
Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But it's just you can still feel that they're really trying to just extend that time as much as they
Adam,
possibly
they had a love story to put into this movie that was very important and very integral to everything that happened.
I can see Julie's getting upset over this.
I know. Julie, why don't you just jump in then? Tack. Second boy.
No, I'm critical of the love story, sequences in this
Gail
movie.
is the best written character in all of cinema.
Shut your mouth. Gail is the absolute worst. Anyone who's Team Gail needs to get a psych eval, because I don't know what's wrong with you. I've never been Team Gail. I've never contemplated it, because he is the worst character, especially by the end of this movie. So
no, I agree. Again,
I'll save my other
facetious here. So, what's ultimately my problem with this movie? So, we kind of get what I kind of wanted from this series. Katniss kind of realizes I kind of have to step into the battlefield. I have to kind of take a position. I have to go and actually join the fight, quote unquote, so to speak, to end the Capitol's regime over everything. The problem is, and I really don't like this, and I've noticed this with a lot of literature does this, and I don't know why this happens. There's always a character that's like should be involved in like the major conflict, but just so happens to not be involved in the major conflict. It kind of just like circles around it while everyone else is actually doing the actual storytelling. That's what I got a lot here. One example I always felt like was like Harry Potter. That happened a lot, at least from the book perspective. Harry would just like be like knocked unconscious and then everything happened while he was freaking sleeping or something like that. Or I think The Hobbit does that too, where Bilbo gets like knocked out and then like everything happens. It's funny I mentioned those two because they kind of suffered from the similar part 1, part 2 thing here. But my big problem is with this, Katniss is involved in this conflict, right? But we're still focused on the stupid propo videos that they're filming, these propaganda videos, which I hate that word propo. By the time I watch this movie, I just like, don't say that word anymore. I don't like it. It's an ugly word for some reason. I don't like this. Stop what you're doing. But the more they do that, and I feel like Katniss should have been actually involved in the battle, because this whole time Katniss is on the outskirts of this battle, or she's two or 5 steps behind the actual battle, and it makes it incredibly uninteresting. Adam, do you feel that way too? Because they try to involve the Hunger Games aspects in it, but it just feels uninteresting not seeing this big battle that's supposed to be happening.
Yeah, you could feel the effort. It's there.
Right.
Something's there. They're trying to shoehorn it right in there.
Right. She's like, oh man, we just missed them. We're like 5 steps behind them. They're ahead of us though. Don't worry. Like, that's a poor decision in my opinion. I wanted her in the conflict.
Like, that's still, I don't know. It feels like they're still trying to extend the time. You're like, oh, well, what if we don't actually put her in that conflict? What if we just like, put her a few steps back, and she's there, but she's not there.
Right, and it could have been interesting, I feel like, or she could have been at least in part of the battle, and then maybe like a mission, they decide, oh, there's this other mission we have to have you go on, and kind of split off from the group, and then that's when you kind of do that. But I just don't think it's very interesting what they were trying to do here with the story from that perspective, because we're not even getting glimpses of any of the battle. We're just told a big battle happened, and everyone's like dead or got beat up, and then you see like ruins, and you see not even that much damage, to be honest, in some parts. I'm like, oh, there was a big war here. It looks like someone just cleaned up and took a broom and swept up the whole place. It looks fine.
Yeah, the capital's relatively clean.
Yeah, considering like literal war is breaking out the whole time.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just, I guess, does that happen in the book like that?
All right, Julie, this is your chance. Talk about it.
Again, here I am playing devil's advocate, because they do explicitly say it. And again, I am critical of that too. I think it would have been more interesting to see her on the front lines and to see the battle taking place. Because as I'm watching the movie, I don't feel, even like it's from the Capitol's perspective, like the imminence of like, oh my God, these, rebel districts are at our front door. Like we are hanging on by a thread. Like this is the end, because you're not in the thick of the battle. But they do explicitly state, because Katniss runs away because first of all, she wants to kill Snow and she wants to be there. But then once Coin and Plutarch find that out, they manipulate it to their benefit. And if you think about it, she is their, golden goose. She's the prize horse. Like, we can't risk losing her.
Right. But you could have kept that even more interesting. They didn't have to go.
I'm giving you setup. Okay, Kevin, listen. So they can't risk losing Katniss. So, and they flat out say, like, you guys are the, the star squad, where we're going to film you guys after the fact. So it's purely for propaganda reasons. Does that make it interesting? No, but that's the reasoning behind it. And they still do have to deal with, the pods and shit.
Which I think that's probably the cooler part of this. I wish I had a little bit more.
They're not completely safe, but they're not in the throes of battle.
Agreed. But again, I just think it's just not interesting. That's where it ultimately comes down.
I'm not saying that it's interesting, but I'm saying that they have a reason for it.
Sure, there could be a reason for anything. There's a reason
but
anything.
My issue is, though, that they're not explicitly stating all of this in this movie.
This
is all like...
If they did, it was very shoestringed, because I barely.
It was very quick, but they did.
Did they? I don't remember.
Yeah, it's when she merges with like Finnick and like that whole crew, and then Boggs comes or whatever, like, you're the Star Squad.
Oh, right.
Battle. We're gonna be behind it.
Yeah, then we introduce the fodder characters that are all gonna die because we can't kill any of the main characters.
Right.
So we gotta have.
Yeah.
But again, I like that aspect too. I like the idea that the game makers went to war with the rebels. I think that was a really cool idea, and how they kind of interjected all these Hunger Game mechanics into the actual city to fight. That's a very interesting aspect. Even though I don't quite understand it, I'm not too sure about the one that was like a black slime that turned into strings.
That was crazy.
And ripped people apart. I didn't know Venom was in this movie. I guess that's what that was. I'm not too sure. It was Don't get me wrong. Totally crazy, totally wild. Not too sure how that works, though. I'm very confused.
Oh, Finnick has that awesome line, too, like, welcome to the 76th Hunger Games.
Yeah, that was cool.
Exactly what it is.
Yeah, and then that's cool. And I do like those character developments. We got to see Finnick return in this, in a more prominent role in this movie, which I do like his character. I like the idea of the other Hunger Games contestants kind of being involved in this war. The other one, Joanna, of course, my girl, me and Adam's girl, actually, she returns, and she has one of the better lines in the movie. Like, she pretty much telling Katniss, like, you know, she's the one that's going to go, that Katniss has to go and assassinate Snow to kind of put an end to the whole Hunger Games. I like that aspect of her character. I do wish she was a little more involved, though. I wish some of them were more involved, ultimately, in some kind of way. But it was nice to see just her return to the character. And another actor that I don't think gets enough credit, Mahershala Ali, I think did a really good job in this movie as Boggs, kind of being the pseudo like military mentor and protector of Katniss throughout the movie. I really don't remember him in too much before this, and obviously now Mahershala Ali is a big actor, and you know he's very well known and whatnot. But it was really good. I thought he did a phenomenal. He was actually one of the standout actors. And again, I do think Jennifer Lawrence she kind of comes into her own as a powerhouse here, especially when we finally get to see some of her bigger confrontations with Donald Sutherland as President Snow. He really just chews the scenery as Snow and does a fantastic job with this, especially their final moment confrontations where they're having at it about, you know, lying to each other and the fly. I think it's fantastic. I really do. And I think they did a really great job with that. The problem is I just think this movie it didn't have to be two movies. That's really what it comes down to. The ultimate conflict towards the end is very interesting. But unfortunately, again, we're just crawling there. Adam, what did you think about, especially I think we talked about how this movie's crawling, especially another example, I think, is when they kind of get to the dress shop with the Tigress, who isn't really explained who she is. And we kind of find out actually in the next review, we'll kind of talk about who Tigress was. But they kind of just stop and hang out for a while. I thought that was so uninteresting. Like, that's one of the stop and stand still moments I'm talking about in this movie.
Yeah, talk about coming to a screeching halt. Like,
because we had a crazy scene, right? They were being chased by these mutant mutt things in the thing, and Finnick dies, which is crazy. He's getting ripped apart. That was kind of cool. I'm not gonna lie, but those are stakes. Those are things that I want to see. Like, oh shit, that's actually like a main guy. I mean, he kind of had like death written all over him. He got married, and you know, he said goodbye to his love and all that. But you know, but at the same time, it still felt kind of emotional. I wish I had a little more time with Finnick. Maybe in the last movie, it was so goddamn long. You couldn't have written some more times with like Finnick to maybe have a stronger bond with Katniss there, besides just being victors. But again, then the plot just stops right before the finale, and it just feels so uninteresting.
I think it's for me, the most concerning part is like literally all of this shit just went down, like literally right outside.
Yeah.
With the venom goo and the mutants. It's like all of these dangers are literally happening like right over there, but they're busy having a conversation
in a basement.
Yeah.
About who loves Katniss.
Yeah, right? Like, I don't know. It's just so not like the world building there. It just seemed off.
He's like, yeah, bro, I love Katniss. Nah, bro, I love Katniss. It's okay, bro. We can both
what are you guys doing? We just almost died.
Yeah, meanwhile, you hear bombs in the background and everyone's dying. It's like, you can kind of hurry up a little bit, you know. Again, that aside. The other thing I want to talk about, too, I actually liked PETA in this movie, and I've been super critical of PETA throughout this entire series, but goddamn, man, he was saying everything I wanted him to say, whether he was being a bad guy or just telling the truth. He kind of addressed a lot of the issues I had with Katniss's character throughout the whole movie, and again, I know he was hijacked or whatever, and he's kind of overcoming that, and like, Katniss is super annoying about it throughout this entire movie, but I think PETA, if he just was like naturally this way, that might have been more interesting than having him like hijacked, because he kind of talked the truth a lot throughout this whole movie about saying how she doesn't really care about him. She just throws him into conflict and expects him to come and save her and be there for her. Again, not the romance, the plot's interesting, but I thought that part was interesting because I actually liked PETA as a character, because I kind of felt his pain kind of boiled to the top here, and I thought that was actually more interesting. Julie, I know you want to talk about it a little bit.
Well, no, my heart just breaks for him because Katniss was so mean to him. Like, he could not help it. I mean, he killed the guy and like tried to kill her a couple times, but like whatever.
Yeah, that was another thing. We just totally forgot Peter just killed some guy on the team. He just like took the guy and he chucked him into the goo, and it's like, oh, No one said anything. No one even addressed. Like Peeta kind of like went, "Oh, damn, I killed the guy." Anyway, Katniss, I still love you.
More than anything, I loved Peeta
Darn
and
that
Finnick's
guy.
relationship in this movie more than anything else. Because Finnick like took him under his wing and was like, I'm gonna watch over you, little
I'm
dude.
gonna put a little memorandum of that guy scene in this video. He really deserves
guy
it. That one guy, the guy in the goo. He had. I don't even know who he was, but he really deserved more. God damn it, he deserved more.
Yeah, that sucked.
What do you think, Adam? I like the idea of though a character kind of being like an untrustworthy known character like that. I kind of do like that plot device just a little bit, where you're not sure what he's gonna do. I wish it wasn't just I'm just gonna strangle Katniss in her sleep. I wish maybe there was maybe a little more depth to that, because I like the idea of like the traitor amongst them or someone they can't trust. I think that is an interesting plot device. Unfortunately, though, the plot of the movie is just way too slow to kind of make it super interesting.
Yeah, I think making Peeta, especially like such a prolific character in the story, that hacked character, I think that's awesome. I really like that, and I agree. I think Peeta was much better in this film. I guess it's kind of weird though, going from how Katniss's and Peeta's relationship was in the first film compared to now. I think that also is affected by the whole young adult love triangle trope thing.
Yeah, I think if you just took it out and if they just had a natural relationship, I think it would be significantly more interesting. And the fact she was so quick to discard him right away and then suddenly be like, oh, well, I care about you, when she starts reciting everything she knows about Peeta when they're having that conversation, like
that was a cute scene.
That was a good scene, but the problem is she still should have cared about him. She was so poignant in the other scene about being, I hate you, Peeta. I don't like you anymore. We should kill him. Let's put a bullet in his head.
Yeah,
and suddenly like, oh well, I still care about you. And then you have Gale on the outskirts, the most useless character in all.
Get out with him. I can't. I love though, and I hate Gale. Especially in this movie, he's realizing like, why am I even wasting my time with you? Because like she's so ridiculous, Katniss. She just constantly is like kissing him.
He also can't act. I mean,
he can't act.
I know that's
that's
my biggest problem. Is like, why does she keep doing this? It makes me confused, and I'm not even in the relationship.
Yeah, and every time Gale's just like, it feels like kissing like a dead person. Like,
I mean, I don't know. He's got the Hemsworth charm there. Is he the youngest one? I think he's the youngest. Liam
is
Hemsworth.
He, or he might be.
He might be the
my
youngest.
Favorite.
Yeah.
This is such a side note. I was watching like behind the scenes stuff for the first movie, and the director like kept saying like how hesitant he was to cast Liam Hemsworth. Like he's like, I really didn't know, blah blah blah. And he kept stressing that, and then he's like, oh, but then I saw him and like he was good for the role. I'm like, no, I think the studio was like, you need to cast him. Yeah, but he's like trying to cover himself, Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about the finale here at this point. So we get to the ultimate finale. Adam, what did you think of the whole culmination of everything? So we get the bombing scene, which I think that whole scene was very tense. I mean, we go through that schlag where we're in the Tigress's shop there. And that's I can't wait to talk about it. We gotta save that for another video. But the whole Tigress thing, that was perfect timing.
In the background.
Yeah, they're hanging out in Tigress's shop, and they go out, her and Gale, which is fine. They kind of just dumped all the rest of the characters, said, you're not important right now. We got to go finish the rest of this movie. Sorry, guys, you stay behind. They go, and I thought that was actually a very well-executed scene up through the end there. I thought there was a lot of intensity. I think the action was very well done. We finally got some interesting cinematography, because God knows the series needed something, because I just like boring shots of just staring at characters all the time can only do so much for you. But we end up finding out that the bombings weren't procured by the Capitol. They were chosen by the rebels. More specifically, Gale was the bad guy the whole time, and everyone rejoiced because of how much they hated Gale. What did you think of that twist, Adam? I thought that was actually a pretty good twist when we find that out later on.
Yes.
And who ends up dying is her sister ends up dying the whole time. The dramatic irony the whole time.
No, I thought that ending was it was a really good culmination, I think, between her sister dying, Gale becoming the bad guy, which I was like, whoa. And then Katniss killing off Coin. Like,
that was a good scene. And I was like,
I liked that stuff.
And then she didn't even kill Snow. Snow gets killed by all the citizens. I like that a lot.
With him cackling with blood spewing out of his mouth. Oh.
Yeah.
I love and I know you mentioned it earlier too, the interaction of Snow and Katniss in his rose garden.
Yeah.
And he's like,
that was a phenomenal scene. Donald Sutherland just really again, he's not featured super a ton in this series, but when he has such a presence about him that he's such an elegantly awesome bad guy that I love. Even if it is a little mustache twirling, if it's a little mustache twirling, I don't mind. That's okay.
Yeah,
he's still really good.
I just love, like, I'm all for killing children, but there needs to be a reason for it, and that had no reason behind it.
I love that. That's like I shouldn't probably say. I don't know. It's a phenomenal line. It's an interesting line.
Such a villain move, but like, there's another villain at play here. I'm gonna be dead no matter what. You might as well take out your next President Snow.
And then, unfortunately, I think, and it doesn't really hurt the movie, but it is, once you kind of know about it, it does hurt. Unfortunately, we did lose Philip Seymour Hoffman before he was able to film a couple of his scenes in this movie. And there's they said there were 2 scenes that they weren't able to film. I'm not sure what the one was. I'm not too sure about, but the one that was obvious was, there's a scene where Haymitch kind of comes in, Woody Harrelson kind of reads a letter from Plutarch, who we just saw in the last scene, and suddenly he's just gone, and he left a letter for Katniss for him to read to her. It's a little jarring, but because of the circumstances, I'm not going to critique it. I understand that they wanted to do this, and it was I really wish Philip Seymour Hoffman could have gave that speech to her, because it was really just a phenomenal goodbye to Katniss, and I really do like that scene. He's such a powerhouse actor, but Woody Harrelson, he kind of does his thing, and I guess for a way, this kind of gives Haymitch a little bit more to do with the story in some ways, because Haymitch really is like an afterthought. I feel like especially after the last movie, like we barely kind of see anymore, and I feel like his involvement was kind of just like whatever, right? And unfortunately, when you have a powerhouse like Woody Harrelson, you kind of want to utilize him a little bit more. But again, I do think that scene's really powerful. But then we come to the wrap up of this movie, and I'll be honest with you, I was on board with the ending really up until we had the whole like Katniss's ending with Peeta and her having a child at the end and frolicking through the meadow, and she's like, "Oh, one day I'm gonna tell you about everything I went." I thought that was a little too corny for me. I don't know what I would have changed. Adam, did you necessarily like that part? Because I kind of liked everything up until that part. I don't know if I really wanted to have that little wrap up for Katniss at the end there.
It felt like a Twilight ending.
Yeah.
Or like your typical young adult movie
like
ending.
You wanted to reward the young girls in the audience with a happy ending.
Yeah,
when I don't know if I would have gone that approach. Maybe it would have been a more somber ending, would have been the correct ending.
I agree. Yeah.
Katniss deserves her happy ending. But I'm going to do, it's a small book thing. Okay. I feel like I remember her saying this line where it's the same thing, but it's definitely got more somberness where she's like, my kids are playing on a graveyard of bones, So it's still like she gets her happy ending, but she's still like carrying that trauma with her.
And that maybe would have been more interesting if they kind of orchestrated that line, some kind of version of that line into this. Because again, this just felt really corny and, like Adam said, very young adulty. Like, here's my baby and there's my husband playing with our child in the meadow. Oh, don't worry, I'm going to tell you about my struggles someday. Cut to credits. Oh, okay. That's what it felt like. I was just like, I did not enjoy that really. The one thing we didn't talk about, which I really wanted to, and I completely forgot it in our last review, we got to hear the Hanging Tree song for the first time, and that kind of became like the theme song, I guess, for the Hunger Games. Adam, do you like that song? I was just curious. I actually do enjoy that song. Oh, that was kind of cool. It was very popular for a while.
Yeah, no, I thought it was good. I liked giving them sort of an anthem, if you will.
Yeah, and it kind of ties into something we're going to talk about a little bit later too, which I think is good too. But yeah, I did like that. And I know it's super random, and we forgot to talk about it last video, but I was like, oh, I kind of like that. Did it come up in this movie? I don't know if they were singing it. I don't remember. Probably not. Probably not, honestly. Probably not. I just want to talk about it.
Yeah, so couldn't get the rights to it.
So if you didn't watch our last review, retroactively go back and put that part in that review, because I'm not going to edit that, because I just thought of it now, and we're doing this the same day, guys. Cut us a break. I thought that was good, and it sucks. I think the Hunger Games as a whole, the ultimately what it comes down to, I think, is this. Mockingjay Part 1 and Part 2 did not need to be 2 movies. It could have brilliantly been done in 1 movie, and I would love to see a supercut of someone just go in and kind of smash these movies together. Hell, make it 3.5 hours or whatever. If you have to make it longer to do something like that, that's fine. People can handle longer movies. I mean, look at freaking Oppenheimer and the Avengers movies, and we have all these super long movies in there to wrap up their stories and tell it the way they need to. but don't make it 2 movies if you don't need to. That's completely unnecessary, and that's just milking the box office. And again, I'll say it's on blue in the face. I am so glad this trend is over in Hollywood, because I think it did hurt this series. I think it hurt the reputation of the Hunger Games a lot, and I think it turned a lot of people off. Adam, I know you weren't really familiar with this till we actually start reviewing the Hunger Games. Do you have like a new appreciation maybe for the series after kind of wrapping all of this up now at this point? Do you see maybe what some of the hype was behind it?
I do, because after I watched all of it, I was like, you know what? I get it. I wasn't there for all of it when it was actually happening, but I get it now because it makes sense. Because I could see, especially like all of the young adult stuff that was fitting in there. Like I can see how, all these teenagers would love this type of stuff and whatnot. But I mean, for the most part, especially with like Catching Fire, it makes a coherent story. And I think it's actually decent.
And it's actually a pretty adult and I would say educated story in a lot of ways, especially talking about like the trials and tribulations of the poor versus the rich and the government.
There's a lot of symbolism.
There's a lot of really strong symbolism. And I know an English teacher is probably like going crazy for us talking about this in a movie because it's there though. And I think rightfully so. I think it does it in a digestible way, I would say.
Yes, as slow moving as some of the parts are, it's like still a very coherent story, and it's got a nice bookend. It's got a start and a finish.
Right, and I think if you just like really trim down this part 1 and part 2, I think this could have been one of the strongest entries in the series. I really think it could have been. There's just so much that could have been done much better, and unfortunately, just this movie fails to do that. What do you think, Julie?
Yeah, I mean, the elephant in the room, it's, it ultimately suffers from being split into 2 parts. Are you going to miss out on some moments, from each movie? Sure, but you would have had a more cohesive story with a cohesive and complete story in one. Because again, it's just dragging it out. And at the end of the day, it wasn't for storytelling, it was for profit, which is what's the most disappointing. If it was together, it could have been pretty close and on par with Catching Fire.
I think it could have been. If it was one movie, I think there's an argument there. But with all this being said, guys, let's put a big number on this one. I'm going to give The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2 a 7 out of 10.
Oh, make no mistake. She intends to take my place now. But I've been watching you. And you watching me. I'm afraid we've both been played for fools.
I don't believe you.
Oh, my dear Miss Everdean. I thought we'd agreed never to lie to each other.
The reason I'm giving it a 7 out of 10 is because I'm kind of taking into consideration part 1 and kind of combining it a little bit with part 2. I know you really shouldn't do that. You should grade every movie the way it is, but unfortunately, when it comes down to it, I think this movie is better than part 1. I would say it's like 10 points stronger than part 1. There's definitely a lot more action. There's a lot more interesting things. The action scenes that they do are phenomenal. And I do think it generally wraps up its story in a very interesting and satisfying way, minus the little hallmark ending we kind of get at the end of the movie. But before that, I think it does a phenomenal job with the material. And like Adam said, I really understand now, I think, more of why the Hunger Games was so popular and in some ways like important to the genre. I think for young adults, I definitely can see that there. It's definitely some of the better material. I would argue it's better than some of the Twilight films, as far as in that regard of like what you're kind of feeding that young adult society into. It's a little more interesting, has a lot more substance in my opinion than those kind of films. But I do think there is some enjoyment to be had here. Unfortunately, it just shouldn't have been 2 movies. If you could have cut these 2 movies up, smashed them together, made an extended super director's cut, and just merged what you needed to, maybe a couple reshoots here and there just to help the pacing fit just a smidge better, you could have had something here. You really could have had a really fun, enjoyable movie, even if it was a little bit longer than even at 3.5 hours. That's better than 4 or 5 hour movie, whatever it ended up being. It could have been a lot more interesting here, and it sucks to say. I think there's just something that could have been done. But all in all, I think I do have a new appreciation for the Hunger Games. I had a good time. I do recommend it if you're interested in like that dystopian novel. Out of all the series out there, there was a couple. There was a lot of other movies that tried to do it and failed miserably. I know the Maze Runner was a popular series that might be interesting for some people to check out. I wish we could have checked it out. We'll save it for another time if you guys like this. Maybe that's something we could look at. But Hunger Games, it did it the first time. I think it did a fine job. Again, it stumbled along the way, but I did find it enjoyable. I gotta tell you. Adam, how about you? What do you think of this one?
I'm going to give Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2 a 7.7 out of 10. I enjoyed it that much more. I think that it had a very good ending. I think those last few scenes where I was not expecting those twists, and they caught me off guard enough to where it became that much more enjoyable to me. And I mean, like I said, I think it was, especially compared to Part 1, it was that much more enjoyable. And I think it was a satisfying ending for me.
Yeah, and I can understand that. I'm not totally against, that score either. I can definitely see where you're coming from as far as that. It's just, unfortunately, because it is a part 2, it's kind of hard, at least for me, to separate it from part 1. And it kind of has to be connected ultimately, because they kind of are the same movie. Even though, we're giving you 2 movies, they are the same movie ultimately. And I kind of have to look at it that way, unfortunately, when I score it. But I can see where you're coming from. I think there is definitely some enjoyment, a lot more enjoyment, but you got to get through part 1, and that's always going to be the biggest hurdle.
You're right. You're absolutely correct.
Julie, what do you think? Last one here.
I'm going to be giving Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2 a 7.9 out of 10.
Your favorite color is green. Is that real?
Yeah, that's real. Yours is orange. Not bright orange. Soft, like the sunset.
Thank you.
You're a painter. You're a baker. You always sleep with the windows open. You never take sugar in your tea. You always double knot your shoelaces. You were right. I can't do this.
I couldn't quite get into the 8 range as much as I wanted to. I do really enjoy the conclusion to this series, especially, the latter act of this film has a lot of action and really good politicking, with the fall of not only President Snow, but President Coin, and a couple twists as well, just to see, these people who you're rooting for, not all of them are, making their ends through, pure ways. There's always going to be another tyrant. So that was an interesting take. And I like that Katniss got her happy ending, as cheesy as it was. Like you said, you have to go through part 1 to get to part 2. So that's the biggest flaw that this movie has.
Yeah, but again, I think Hunger Games does deserve to be acknowledged for what it did. I think it did help kind of push like a genre a little bit more forward in a different way. When we went from vampires to dystopian novels. So Hunger Games obviously caught on just at the right time. It caught fire to the generation, if you will. Ho-ho. I know, I'm so clever. Just stop. The weird thing is, that was kind of it for Hunger Games, right? That was it for a very long time. That was in 2015, and we haven't heard anything since until the year 2023, which we'll be talking about that in our next video, so make sure you stay tuned for that one. But I want to thank you guys all so much for joining us for this episode of The Real Review. Let us know your thoughts and comments down below. Do you like The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2? Did you enjoy it as much as we did? Did you enjoy it even less than we did? What about the series as a whole? Do you guys think, Hunger Games deserves all the hate it kind of gets? Or, what do you guys think? I'm really interested to see, what your thoughts are. But again, let us know down there below. Make sure you leave a like on this video. Thank you all so much for joining us. My name's Kevin. That's Adam and Julie. We are your Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies, real thoughts. We'll catch you next time.
If you guys like what you've seen here today, consider giving this video a like and leaving your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to stay up to date with everything Real Movie Guys related, make sure to hit that subscribe button and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And don't forget, all you audio listeners at home, we are available on many podcasting platforms. Just search The Real Movie Guys, you should pop right up. Thank you again all so much for joining us on this episode of The Real Review. We are The Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies, real thoughts. Catch you next time.